We go to chapter 18 in business, production of goods and services. So when I talk about production of goods and services, we're talking about creation of goods and services for the benefit of human or consumers. So it's managing resources effectively to produce goods and services. So we talked about production already. Production is the creation of goods and services. So why do we create goods and services? For consumer satisfaction. So let's go to managing resources effectively to produce goods and services. So if effective management of resources in terms of production. Production is the provision of product or a service to satisfy consumer wants and needs. The process of production adds value to the raw materials and bought-in components, as we've learned in chapter 1. Value added is the difference between the cost of inputs and the final selling price of the product of the service. So the cost of input, we're talking about raw materials and components, and the amount you finally sold the product. So the difference between it is called the value added. It is not profit. Profit is selling price minus cost price. So the production process applies to manufacturing as well as service industries. In adding value, businesses combine the inputs of a business, that's the factors of production, land, labor, capital, and enterprise, to produce more valuable outputs, which is the final good or service, in order to satisfy consumer needs and wants. However, these factors of production, also called economic resources, can be combined in different proportions as inputs to the production process as shown in the diagram. So why do we call it economic resources? We call it we call these factor inputs economic resources because they are not always available. We have to buy them. Yes. They are limited in supply. That's why I call them economic resources. So we have a diagram here which talks about inputs. So we need land, labor, capital, enterprise, which has to go through processing before we can have outputs like goods and services. So whatever we have to produce, whatever we have to sell in the society, in the world, it has to go with all the factors of production, no matter what it is. Services, be it products, it has to go through the land, through the inputs, which are land, labor, capital, and enterprise. So for a business to be competitive, it should combine these inputs of resources efficiently so that it makes the best use of resources as its disposal to keep costs low and increase profits. So the first point here is how a firm will be competitive. For you to be competitive, you need to be able to sell at a lower price. And for you to be able to sell at that price, it means you are able to reduce your cost. And reducing your cost means your cost of production. So if your cost of production can be reduced, you might even be selling at the price you used to sell. Then you'll be making more profit. Yeah, no. Economies of scale is expansion. No. Here we're talking about effective use of resources.
Scales is when the cost, if there is a less cost when you're buying more and at a less cost.
Yeah, but here we're not talking about economies of scale. Here we're talking about even a small firm. Yeah. How you have to produce, how you have to be efficient. We're talking about production efficiency here. Yeah. A way in which you have to reduce your cost as much as you can. Not about expanding. A small business can also reduce its cost by ensuring that it's efficient. So efficiency does not involve you expanding. Efficiency is how you are able to manage your resources to reduce your cost of production. So if you're able to reduce your cost of production, then you can make more profit. That means you can still sell the price you used to sell and make more profit because your cost of production has fallen. And for you to remain competitive, you have to be efficient. Because if you are not efficient, if your competitors are more efficient than you do, they will sell at a lower price and customers will go to them. So you lose out on customers. That's the point there. So in a developing country where wages are low, it may be more efficient to use many workers and few machines to produce goods. This process is called labor intensive. They said in developing countries where we have low wage rates. So it is efficient for firms in such countries to use more of labor than capital, like machine or equipment, because equipment and machine are expensive. But you are in a country that has a cheap labor. So why do you want to buy equipment? It is not efficient. It is not wise for you to buy equipment there because the cost of labor is cheap. That is the point I'm making here. However, in developed countries, where labor costs are high, production is often capital intensive, where businesses use machines, robots and employ few workers. So here we're talking about the difference between developing country and developed countries. In developed countries, because it is more of services, it is expensive to hire workers. Yes. So they use equipment, machine. But in developing countries where it's cheap to employ workers, use labor intensive. So developed countries use capital intensive, while developing countries use labor intensive. I think the point is clear there.
Yes.
So we go to the operations department. So when production has to be made or created, it has to be through the operations department. So the role of operations department in the business is to take inputs and change them into outputs for customer use. So it is the operations department that do the processing for the finished goods. So inputs can be physical goods or services. The operations manager is responsible for making sure that raw materials are provided and made into finished goods or services. The different sections of this department will vary depending on what the business produces. So for operations department, it varies. Like the school, they have the operations department where the teachers are. A bottle company water, they have the operations department where the equipment or the workers are that produce the bottle. So it depends on the kind of business you do. That will determine the kind of operations department you have.
Yeah.
So here they said the typical manufacturing business will have a factory manager which is in charge of quantity and quality of the products coming off the production line. That's the raw materials.
Yeah.
Then we have the purchasing manager who will be responsible for providing the materials, components, and equipment required for the production. Yeah. So the purchasing manager is the one in charge of getting these resources to the operations. Then we have the research and development manager who will be responsible for design and testing of new production process and products. So we have R&D manager is the one in charge of research, finding out customer market testing. The manager is in charge. So in retail business, this department will be similar, but the factory manager will be replaced by managers for the shop. So if it is retail, they don't produce. So they sell finished goods, so they don't need a factory manager. So he will be replaced by a branch manager. I think it's clear.
Branch.
Yeah, branch or shop manager.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah.
Clear.
Yes.
So that takes us to productivity. When we talk about productivity, we're talking about the measure of a business efficiency. Your measure of efficiency, that's productivity, which is output divided by input. So the level of production is the total output of a business in a given time period. So our level of production is the total of what we are producing at a given period of time. That is our level of production. Yes. So how are we going to be able to increase our level of production? We'll be able to increase our level of production through productivity. So if we are able to increase our productivity, our level of production will increase because it means our output is increasing. Yes. So what is the formula for productivity? It is output divided by quantity of inputs. Business often wants to measure the productivity of one of the factors of production or inputs, usually labor. This is measured by dividing the output over a given period of time by the number of employees. So for labor productivity, which labor is one of the inputs, factor inputs. So we can measure the productivity, which is the number our output divided by the numbers of workers. So the output, the total output divided by the number of workers involved. Oh, yeah. That is labor productivity. I think it's clear. Yes. So productivity can be raised by either using fewer inputs to produce the same output or using the same inputs to produce a higher level of output. If employees become more efficient, the amount of output produced per employee will rise, and therefore the cost of producing each product will fall. So that is when you use the same inputs to produce more output. This is going to employees because they become more efficient. As a result of that, they can produce more. And so you are using the same numbers of workers to produce high level of output.
But motivation has.
Yeah, motivation can help anyway. Motivation, skills, training.
Yeah, training. Okay.
So this will make the business to be more competitive, and it is the main reason why businesses are usually very focused on increasing productivity. So the point here is that with productivity, to increase productivity, it does not only mean that you have to increase the number of workers. The number of workers might remain the same, and your output might increase. Do you understand? Yes. Or you increase your cost of production. You use fewer products to produce more. So that is also productivity. Do you get it? So that's the two ways in which productivity can increase.